Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden, broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. Thank you for joining me today. Yeah, we had some difficulties this morning, a few technical problems, but we're back. And I think we've got a great show for you. When we come back, some of the anomalies, if you will, in the news before we get into my main thesis today, which is Pierre Poilievre will not be taking a left turn. Now, you might argue he's already too far left, but he's not going any farther. And the mainstream media is actually divided over this. And we'll find out what I mean by that in mere moments.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like the station, like the show. And subscribe if you haven't, and resubscribe if you have to. Sometimes people get unsubscribed and you have to resubscribe. Share this show with your friends and family. I beg of you. Please, because YouTube won't share this station. And we've had that problem from day one, but we keep fighting back. And we keep inching upwards. Maybe not at the rate of some other stations, but we're making it. Despite huge YouTube suppression. And why? Well, could be a number of things, but hey, I don't focus on the negative, I focus on the positive. So we have to do. Otherwise, might as well give up. Before we get to no left turn, what do I mean by that? Here's an incredible story from Black Box Reporter. And somebody's getting $2,000 an hour on how the Carney cabinet, needs to talk to so-called right-wing Republicans, or the Trump administration, or MAGA individuals. Tips on how to talk to the U.S. $2,000 an hour. Some consultant is getting. Hey, I could do that job. I could tell them how to talk to common sense, principled conservatives. Stop lying. Unlike the liberals. That might be a good start, Melanie. Maybe just understand that these are people who actually largely believe what they're saying. Yeah, I know there's just a lot of chicanery going on with rhinos in the United States, but overall, I think the Trump team is a lot more acquainted with the truth than the Carney team ever will be. And of course, people are finally beginning to notice that Mark Carney was conspicuous by his absence. But this is incredible. CBC is actually trying to pretend that Mark Carney was really there, although he wasn't. So CBC is doing their part, and this is from Ryan Garrettson, always has some great posts up, doing its part to make it look like Carney is still important in the world stage this morning. They're actually showing a screenshot of Carney as proof that he's in some important virtual meeting with some of the leaders who were at the White House yesterday. Who gave them that? Clearly, the Prime Minister's office. This is our state-run media blatantly protecting his reputation, covering his ASS. Yeah, it's exactly what's going on here, because Mark Carney was conspicuous by his absence. And I think I'm probably the only outlet that's actually explained why Donald Trump didn't want Mark Carney there this week. Because Mark Carney once again made the stupid decision of putting policies that Donald Trump doesn't like in Trump's face, literally days before a meeting was scheduled to happen. Last time he did this, Carney announced he was going to recognize Palestine, like literally 48 hours before Donald Trump makes a decision on tariffs. Of course, Donald Trump makes a decision that is not good for Canada. Did Mark Carney think he was going to be at this all-important meeting of the European Union? And remember what Mark Carney likes to say.
Mark, you look like you were about to.
Yeah, it was a tell.
As a European, as a
European, I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
I'm
an Irish citizen. Yeah, so there you
welcome.
go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European, I like to say following.
Is a picture worth 1,000 words? Well, that one is. There's European Mark Carney sitting at the World Economic Forum. There it is, right behind him, the backdrop, WEF, World Economic Forum. I'm a European, he says. Yeah, he is. He has citizenship in in the UK. Probably still does. He said he was going to renounce it, but I doubt it very much. But that, of course, is Mark Carney, the European, who should be part of the European Union. He should be there. Donald Trump doesn't want him there because Mark Carney intentionally started negotiating with Sweden for potentially buying fighter aircraft, the Gripen fighter aircraft from Sweden, which we need like a hole in the head. We have to follow through and buy more Joint Strike Fighters, the F-35. That's what we've already got, 16 of them. We need to finish the order, and because it's interoperability, and this is why we need the F-35. I know some people out there say, well, it's not the best fighter. It is the fighter that all services that fly aircraft in the United States are flying. Royal Air Force, Royal Australian Air Force, all fly the F-35, and that's who we train with. That's who we operate with. Those are the countries we are most liable to be flying with. I know, I was in the Air Force for 10 years, always down with the U.S. Navy, flying with their F-18s in those days. Well, that was a long time ago. They're flying F-35s now, off carriers. United States Marines is flying F-35. United States Air Force is flying the F-35. Yeah. And Canada cannot be a country of two fighter jets. This is absolute idiocy. All right. Here's a great one from my good friend Mark Nixon. Canada named most positive leader in world state. Well, most positively stupid, I guess, but incredible. Who comes up with this? Who elected Canada as the most positive leader on the world stage? Yeah, that's enough bedtime fairy tales, folks. Now this is incredible. Now we have the autonomous self-government nation of Métis in Saskatchewan. And get this. Thank you, Jennifer L., for bringing this one to our attention. All right, buckle up for this one. The Métis Nation, Saskatchewan, is a recognized self-government in the eyes of the federal government. They are funded to the tune of $100+ million a year to operate. And their CEO, the honcho, the grand poobah, he's a former federal public servant. And he used to work for what used to be called Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I think they changed the name again. It used to be Indian and Northern Affairs. Trudeau changed it to Indigenous Peoples and Northern Affairs. I think Carney has changed it too, and I couldn't be bothered looking it up, but that is incredible. So a former bureaucrat is now Grand Poobah of this self-autonomizing Métis Nation. Incredible. Yes, and as I said, thanks again, Ryan, for putting this one up. There's the group photo. Yeah. They're all there except for, Mark Carney's not there. Now, Mark Carney, the European, wasn't invited. I wonder why. Yeah, it's got something to do with fighter jets and the increasing animosity that Donald Trump has towards Mark Carney. So, that's where we are with that. Here's a great one, from Viva Fry. And he uses this word that I raised a couple of weeks ago, anarcho-tyranny. That's a state, of course, where the government goes after its political opponents more than it goes after real criminals. So Viva Fry, David Freiheit says, this is Canada. The intruder broke into a man's house with a weapon. Now the homeowner faces charges of assault. Anarcho-tyranny. Do you believe it? Yeah, of course I believe it. But that's the kind of country we live in. And what else? Look at this. Ottawa moves ahead with gun confiscation plan targeting legal gun owners. This one from Juno News. So not only are you guilty of assault if you defend your property, your family, and your life from an intruder who comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning, or was it 2 o'clock? Well, regardless, it doesn't matter. He was uninvited. He came in to steal your property, perhaps potentially injure somebody. And you're not allowed to defend yourself. I'm not allowed to defend my family if somebody comes into my home. And by the way, I'm not going to have a gun to do it because the government's taking my guns away. And where are they going? Critics raise eyebrows over plan to send prohibited firearms to Ukraine war effort. You remember that? The government's collecting your firearm so they can send it to Ukraine. And Ukraine can then sell it on the black market to what? The Mexican cartels? Yes, they'll probably end up with them. Or some other terrorist group in Eastern Europe. Well, that's exactly what Ukraine does with a lot of the weapons. They sell them on the black market. We give them to them gratis, free of charge. Ukraine sells them on the black market. And we are the dupes. We are the idiots who put up with this. Canadian taxpayers are saddled with all of this billions of dollars. Carney wants to give another $2.2 billion to Ukraine. I wouldn't be surprised if he does it today. And it goes into that black hole, of Kiev. It goes into that bottomless pit and of that corrupt Ukrainian government where the president and everybody else in his government are lining their pockets with foreign cash. And I know it's disgusting. By the way, if you have a chance to read this article about Matt and Nicole Alexander, I interviewed Matt last week. It got 5,000 views. And nobody really got to see it because it was totally submerged, not suppressed, submerged on social media. So I'm tried again yesterday. I used his interview with me and my interview with Marty Moore of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms as the basis of a Substack article. I encourage you to read this today. I really do. I encourage you to read this because this is the state of freedom in this country. Teachers can be fired, even though they were considered to be some of the best teachers at the school. They were actually people. Matt Alexander was actually designated as the principal when the principal was traveling or away. Matt Alexander filled in. So obviously he had the confidence of his school and his school board. But his son happened to be Josh Alexander. And Josh Alexander objected to male students using female students' bathrooms at his Ottawa area school. And Matt's wife really wasn't too enthusiastic about Pride season or Pride month at the school. So they had to be fired over that. That's the state of freedom, not the state of that's the state of non-freedom in Canada. Now I want to get into the Poilievre segment here before we end with where Donald Trump is going with Ukraine. And I think this is actually quite brilliant. But let's listen to Pierre Poilievre for a minute in his victory speech. I think he really, as I said yesterday, I think he really set the stage for where he wants to go as leader of the Conservative Party and official opposition leader, which will be in a matter of probably a week.
Battle River Crowfoot. They're the kind of what you see is what you get. Give you the shirt off their back. Tell it like it is. Common sense people. They reinforce. I love you too. Thank you very much. I love you. And they reinforced a lot of lessons that all of us in politics have to learn and relearn again. Humility and hard work, loyalty and love. You see, the people in these communities, they fight their own battles, but they're always ready to stop and help a neighbor or a friend. They know how to stretch a dollar, and most of all, they know, in the words of the great Paul Harvey, how to bail together a family with the soft, strong bonds of sharing. It reminded me of all of these things, and they also reminded me that the road to success is never a straight line. And most of all, you should never give up in hard times. That whenever hardship strikes, you need to stand up and keep on going. And that if you care about something, you don't give up on it when things get difficult or you suffer a setback. These stories that were on the faces of the people I met, the woman suffering from cancer who had just overcome days of radiation treatment, who showed up at my town hall in Stettler to tell me to keep going. I say to her, you don't give up, so I don't give up. The waitress.
Don't give up, so I don't give up. That's what we need to hear more of from Pierre Poilievre.
I met in the same town who told me she also works as a teacher and a ranch hand, but has no money left at the end of the month somehow, having 3 jobs. Because she doesn't give up, I won't give up. Or Patty. Patty, a female prison guard who works at the Drumheller Penitentiary and who was tied up and viciously assaulted by a violent criminal, and told me that she wasn't afraid.
Of course, if you saw the segment I put on a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now, Pierre Poilievre was talking to that prison guard from Drumheller, which is a medium security prison, right? So how do you get tied up and tortured at a medium security prison? And this is the same prison, of course, where the prisoners are getting drugs and paraphernalia, probably porn, delivered to their cells, to the cell window by drones. This is the Drumheller medium security prison that Pierre Poilievre is talking about here. Just incredible. That's the state of our criminal justice system in Canada. I tell you, if Poilievre is serious about this, and I hope he is, I hope he wants to reform, improve, better our criminal justice system. He's got his work cut out for him, because he's going to be coming up and butting heads with a deep state that likes it this way.
Because she was too busy thinking about the job that she had to do to protect her fellow prison guards. My message to her is, you don't give up, so I don't give up. To Bill Bauer, who turned 100 years old in Acme. He was born and raised in a sod hut in rural Saskatchewan and lived through the Dust Bowl and the Depression, all to move to Alberta and start generation after generation of family here in this wonderful region. Because he doesn't give up, I don't give up. To the great people of the special areas whose ancestors were told a century ago, including Damien's great-grandparents, that they'd never be able to farm on that land. Too tough and too dry. And yet, on the homestead signs that you drive by on the highway, those old names are still there, and their great-great-grandchildren are still making those fields blossom. They never gave up, so I will never give up. To the great...
Yeah, I always say Poilievre was Ottawa-Washed when he came to Ottawa 21 years ago. And of course, that means to become part of the Ottawa establishment. Is it possible to be Alberta-Washed? Has that by-election made Pierre Poilievre into the person he was when he left Alberta 21 years ago? He was a fairly principled conservative in those days. Has this experience going door to door, meeting real people again, meeting the real Albertans, 80% of whom voted for him in that riding, those who voted. And the turnout was very high. And we'll find out this in a minute. Did that experience really benefit Pierre Poilievre in terms of getting back to who he really is, getting back to reality, understanding who real people are? They're not the bureaucrats in Ottawa. Those aren't real people. Even though we have more people working for the federal government than any other sector in the economy right now. More people working in the public sector than working in the private sector, in any single instance in the private sector. This is absolutely outrageous. But how is the mainstream media responding to Pierre Poilievre's victory? Okay, nobody is saying, oh, sorry, 80.4%, that's not high enough. He should have gotten 85 or 90. Nobody's saying that, okay? I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to hear that, because that would not only be stupid, but completely irresponsible. Yes, he won. And he won almost as large as Damien Carrick did in the last federal election. Damien got 83%. Pierre Poilievre almost 81%. And yours truly was completely dead on when I said Poilievre would win 80%. And I joked about that yesterday, because I'm rarely ever right in my political prophecies or my political predictions. I've been wrong so many times. I'm not afraid to admit that. But yeah, I was wrong. So what the mainstream media is largely saying, okay, Pierre won, but it's a lesson. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get the lesson there, because during the campaign, Poilievre said a lot of the things he used to say when he was being a principled conservative as the leadership candidate for the party in 2022, when he won the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. He was sounding a lot like that Pierre Poilievre, the Pierre Poilievre who brought coffee and donuts to the Freedom Convoy and celebrated what the Freedom Convoy was doing. He was sounding more like that. However, folk, some of the mainstream media are saying, sorry, Pierre Poilievre's got to change his tone. He's got to sound more like a grown-up. Really? I thought he did. He's got to sound less combative, less hostile, more of a gentleman. He has to join the gentleman's club, the country club in Ottawa, known as Parliament Hill. He has to join the country club and be a little more friendly to Mark Carney. Be a little more respectful of the Prime Minister. And policy-wise, don't talk about those hard-edged conservative policies. Moderate. Move to the left. And you can hear CBC do this right here. This is incredible.
People in Battle River Crowfoot have elected a new member of Parliament. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has won the federal by-election and will once again have a seat in Ottawa. CTV's Evan Kenny joins us in studio. Now, Evan, this was a high-profile race that could influence Poilievre's political future.
That's why I say sometimes you can't tell the difference between CBC and CTV these days because they're both talking the same way.
How does this help his case to stay on as Conservative leader?
Brendan, one political analyst believes Poilievre getting back into Parliament is just the first step. Now he has to make more than just Albertans in his riding believe he's the right man for the job.
Thank you very much.
Pierre Poilievre is heading back to the House of Commons. The Conservative leader ran away with the federal by-election in Battle River Crowfoot, earning more than 80% of the vote.
No, I'm not surprised at all. He did the work. He was to every rural area in his riding.
I'm very disappointed and shocked at that.
I felt that he would probably win, but I didn't think he would have a commanding win.
That's who we wanted to begin with, right?
While he's the man more than 40,000 people in Alberta wanted as their MP, he'll have to show Conservatives across the country Canadians want him as the next Prime Minister.
Sorry, but didn't he do that 3 years ago? Didn't he appeal to Conservatives? He won overwhelmingly, and it wasn't a rigged race, unlike Mark Carney's, which certainly appeared to be a rigged race. And I thought he proved to Conservatives across the country at that time he was the leader of the party. And who exactly do they think is going to come in here and just replace a guy who's been in the job for 3 years? Clearly, this is all CBC wishful thinking that we have another Liberal Party, another red Tory party in Canada. They love it that way.
Step is going to be the campaigning he does between now and when Parliament resumes and how he conducts himself.
He received fewer votes than Damien Carrick, who won the riding in the spring election, then stepped down so Poilievre could run. The Conservative leader will face an automatic leadership review at the party's convention in January.
That's probably enough to at least avoid adding questions to his suitability for the leadership.
Cheers!
Independent candidate Bonnie Critchley is toasting to her efforts. She finished second, earning 10% of the vote.
My entire purpose, when I started to right now, has been to tell Monsieur Poilievre that he is not allowed to just walk in and use us as a tool and then disappear back to Ottawa.
Critchley wants to see Poilievre back in Battle River Crowfoot when he's not campaigning and bringing the riding's concerns to Ottawa. Poilievre says once Parliament is back, his party is proposing a Canadian Sovereignty Act that in part would legalize pipeline construction and mine approvals and eliminate the industrial carbon tax.
But he's going to have to be nicer. So here's another take from CTV. And I find this interesting because Vassy Kapelos, a host of Question Period on the weekend, and she has her own show as well. Generally fair to conservatives and fair to liberals. I don't know how, I don't know her at all, I've never been on her show. I've never even talked to her. I've never even emailed her. I know a lot of the Ottawa press corps, but I don't know Vassy Kapelos. But I think she can be generally and genuinely fair at times. And her analysis here, and she says, well, I'm not really offering analysis, but yes, she is. I think it's actually quite good. And let's listen to this.
Vassy Kapelos is standing by in Ottawa with more this morning. Vassy, good morning. Good to see you. So this was a victory for Poilievre that was pretty much guaranteed. Nonetheless, it is a big hurdle that he has now overcome.
Yeah, it's an enormous hurdle, Marcia. It's great to see you as well. And I think even if we take our cues from what Mr. Poilievre was saying, and even the kind of how, like the demeanor, the enthusiasm, you could almost see the weight of not having a seat in the House of Commons shed from him. And maybe, I don't know what the right word is to describe it, like more confidence, more, certainty, I guess, in what his future looks like, at least in the near term, versus what it has been since the general election. There are still a number of tests ahead for his leadership, but this was a big hurdle. It's cleared. The Conservatives I'm speaking to just want to put it in the rearview mirror, focus instead on, the opposition that they will form, that they will constitute when the House of Commons returns, and then ultimately that party convention in January in Calgary and the leadership review, that through the rules of the party, he will face then.
He will face then. So does the victory last night in Alberta help secure him as leader? I mean, January seems like an awful long way away, but just curious, does it help him in the eyes of the Conservatives who perhaps were thinking twice about Poilievre?
Yeah, I think so. It's a great question. I don't know for sure. A lot can happen between now and then, but I do think it's fair to give him his due. Yesterday, the conversation was, what would the margin of victory look like? Would he be able to secure as wide as perfunctory a win as Damien Couric, who stepped aside for Poilievre, did in the general election? And he did. He won by a very, very, very decisive majority, by a huge swath of people in that riding. And I think it's fair to give him his due for that. And I think that just the message that sends to Conservative supporters is that the base of support for a Poilievre-led Conservative Party, particularly in this case in Alberta, but perhaps in other places where they did secure a lot of support in the last election, is still there, right? It's still solid. It's still coming out. The turnout even for a by-election was quite remarkable, right? Historically, by-elections have very low turnout. That was not the case in this by-election. So I do feel like there is, it's like this idea of like wind beneath your wings, right? And politics is often about a narrative and about that kind of thing. So I think the message is one for, a wider swath of Canadians, but also very specifically, as you point out, Conservative supporters who had been reflecting on a lesser amount of relevance that the party has had and that Poilievre has had since the general election, without a seat in the House of Commons, with the government kind of dictating the day-to-day news cycle, the political news cycle, very unlike what it was like a year ago when Poilievre was dictating that news cycle. I think there were questions and conversations going on about how firm a grip Poilievre does have on the leadership. This isn't the only test or the only thing that will answer that question. But if Poilievre had hope that this sent a signal to Conservative supporters, I think just by virtue of the margin of victory, the decisive nature of his victory, it likely did.
So he had a big loss in the spring, a win last night. What are you expecting, perhaps maybe in a change of tone, when he is back in the House of Commons?
There it is. And I think she's expecting her to say, yes, he needs to change. But she disappoints.
Honestly, I don't expect a change of tone. And I say that for a few reasons. First of all, last night, I listened now this morning to, part of it last night and then the rest this morning, everything he said to supporters. And it was very much what we had heard during the election campaign and prior. And I've also been speaking to as many people as I can who were involved in the campaign and who have been involved kind of in the upper echelon of the party since. And my sense is that they don't think a change in tone is required or has been necessitated. And people watching may have a different view of that. And given the outcome of the election, I understand how people would take a different view. But their feeling is that the messaging that they had outside of Trump, outside of what happened with the NDP, actually did resonate to a greater degree with Canadians and their supporters than previous messages the Conservatives have had. So this idea that he has to deliver it in a different way or moderate in some way, they just don't buy into. Again, like, I'm not rendering an analysis on whether that's true or not, but that is what has been conveyed to me. And in every instance over the summer, and including last night, where we have heard Mr. Poilievre speak to reporters or speak to Canadians, that is echoed, right? Like, it's not like anything is different than it was 6 months ago in the issues he's focused on, primarily around, for example, cost of living. I would say there's kind of been a pivot towards talking about immigration more, but otherwise it's very much what we heard during the election around cost of living. And the tone is very much the same as well. How that translates in the House of Commons up against a Mark Carney-led government versus a Justin Trudeau-led government is going to be another test for the party come the fall.
CTV's chief political.
Excellent. Thank you, Vassy, for that. And
Mark, you look like you were about to.
Yeah, it was a tell.
As a European, you know, as a
European,
honorary
I am a
European,
European, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Oh.
Irish citizen. Yeah. So there you
welcome.
go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European, I like to say the following.
now, what's going on?
President Zelensky.
Stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine, she gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
I want it.
Yeah. So we are saying this sensitive topic. Yeah. Yes, please. And thanks to our partners and that you supported this format, that after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO. I mean, all partners around Ukraine.
I'm not sure what the hell Zelensky is actually trying to say here, except that he's portraying himself as being close to Donald Trump again, not just close physically at the moment, but that they're friends again. And I'll explain in a minute why Donald Trump is looking right past Zelensky here.
Thanks them, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
President Trump.
Do you think it's fair?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. So, President Zelensky, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
No, I think that's true. I think we're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
And as you met with Putin on Friday, today you've got President Zelensky here. As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards?
Well, I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be. Look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
President Zelensky.
We'll get back to that in a minute. But Donald Trump, the last time Zelensky was seated next to him in that same room, probably that same chair, Donald Trump said Zelensky had no cards. Zero. He had 0 cards to play. He's really saying the same thing now. But he's looking beyond Zelensky and saying, you're going to have to accept Russian demands. It's over for you. When you start putting 60-plus-year-olds on the battlefield and 16-year-olds on the battlefield, you're finished. You have nothing left. And Europe might sputter and sputter about having, a war with Russia over this. They know they can't. They know they can't even fathom that. What else is going on here? well, clearly there's a acceptance now from the European Union, even from rhinos like Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, that Ukraine is not going to emerge from this unscathed. They're going to be relinquishing Crimea and probably parts of the Donbas region. And Trump has put that out there, and there's a gradual but clear acceptance of that. And when we come back from the break, Donald Trump has finally said, U.S. troops on the ground there, forget it, ain't going to happen. Well, after the merchandise break, I'll get into that. Please have a look at the merchandise. I think we've got some great stuff there. I want to play this. This, of course, is the White House press secretary talking directly to this issue. And I think this is very interesting.
We've heard phrases like coalition of the willing. We've also heard Article 5-like guarantees. When it comes to the security guarantees, what is the current status of that? I know the president earlier today mentioned boots on the ground would be UK, France, Germany possibly, but unequivocally said no U.S. troops on the ground, but U.S. coordination. Can you elaborate on that, and what would the red lines be?
Sure. Well, you got to the heart of what I was going to say to all of you today on security guarantees, which is the president has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine, but we can certainly help in the coordination and perhaps provide other means of security guarantees to our European allies. The president understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends in Europe and also to continue to cooperate and discuss these matters with Ukraine and Russia as well.
Carolyn, now, have the Russians responded at all? I know we spoke with President Putin last night. What has been their response? Because we've heard some reports from the Kremlin and others saying they're unequivocally against NATO troops on the ground.
Well, look, the president continues to have these conversations with both leaders. Those conversations took place in Anchorage, Alaska, again yesterday with the Europeans and President Zelensky, and he has directed his team to come up with a framework for these security guarantees that can be acceptable to help ensure a lasting peace and end this war.
Heading into Alaska, a lot of the focus in the talk was on this trilateral meeting between these three leaders. Can you explain how this went from a trilateral meeting involving President Trump to now the focus being on this bilateral meeting without the president first?
Well, look, the president has spoken to both leaders about this, and both leaders have expressed a willingness to sit down with each other. And so our national security team will help both countries do that. Ultimately, the president has always said that there are areas of disagreement in this war that will have to be discussed and decided upon by these two countries. And so he wants these two countries to engage in direct diplomacy. He's said that from the very beginning, which is why he's agreeable to the idea of having President Zelensky and President Putin get together. And I understand accommodations for that meeting are underway. As soon as we hear more details, we'll be sure to let all of you know.
So who do you think is going to dominate that meeting with Zelensky and Putin together in the same room? Obviously Putin. So what is Trump doing here? He has essentially said, we're going to give you a security guarantee, which is very vague. It can mean just about anything. But we're not going to occupy Ukraine with American troops. Do you think the remaining NATO countries can do anything without the United States? Probably not. So Donald Trump has essentially done what he said he was going to do when he was running for president the last time. Establish a peace in Ukraine the only way possible, which is to recognize that the Donbass region was at war with the rest of Ukraine. The Donbass region wants to be part of Russia. The people there voted on that question. And that Crimea is not going to revert back to Ukrainian ownership. And that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. So the security guarantee is a way of nullifying any potential that Ukraine will ever be a member of NATO, or that NATO will actually play any vital role in the restitution of peace in Ukraine. So I've characterized Donald Trump on the peace process, on the endless war question, as whiplash foreign policy. Because one day he's giving weapons to Ukraine, the next day he's talking about peace. One day it's Biden's war, the next day it's very much looking like Trump's war. But I think there is a plan here. And it might have been a little slow in coming. But I think Trump is playing the game very well and very adeptly at this point, and very adroitly. And I have to give him credit for that, because I've had massive doubts about whether or not he's capable or willing to have a peace there, because there's tremendous pressure from the warmongers, from the military-industrial complex, from the neoconservatives amongst the party rank and file, and the people in a lot of the senators, a lot of the congressmen are neoconservative. They want to continue these wars because they're profitable. I think Donald Trump is emerging from this in a way that makes, and as he said, everybody wins, because Ukraine cannot continue this war. It's not going to be a country at all much longer. It won't have anybody living. It is completely eradicated so much of its humanity, and those that have not been killed in the war. And Colonel Douglas McGregor, who's been on this show a couple of times, and you know him very well, estimates it's 1.8 to 2 million fatalities for Ukraine. Those are numbers reminiscent of the Great War from 1914, 1918, where countries literally lost millions of combatants. So that is where Ukraine is. It needs this war to end sooner. Zelensky doesn't give a damn about the people of Ukraine. He's looking for his political, his economic feature, as he knows he's not going to remain president of Ukraine. Whether it's the United States or Ukrainians that deliver the coup de grace, whatever, and I'm not necessarily meaning he's going to be removed in a physical sense. He will at least be removed in a political sense. But whether it's the Ukrainians who do that or the United States that does that, his days are numbered. And he's looking to find somewhere to go when this is all over, where he's got his villa, where he's got a Swiss bank account, where he's got his money, and where he can retire from the hurly-burly of politics. And that's what Zelensky is thinking about right now. And he wants to keep the war going as long as he can, so he can amass as much as he can for his exile. And that's unfortunately what it comes down to. Thanks for sharing this broadcast today with your friends and family. YouTube had its thumb on it today. You wonder sometimes, why do they, they encourage you for a couple of days and they put their thumb in the broadcast. But thanks for your support today. Thank you so much for your support today. I will be back again at the same time tomorrow, 10 a.m. And watch me tonight on the Conservative Corner with my good friend Nicole. It's his show. I do that now once a week. We just discuss conservative issues, or issues that are relevant to small c conservatives, small l libertarians, and we discuss whether or not the Conservative Party of Canada is actually fulfilling those needs, addressing those aspirations, and advancing those objectives. And if they're not, we say so. If they are, I'll say so. But I'm in nobody's pocket, and that's what this show has always been about. Thanks for watching. Be back again tomorrow, but watch me tonight. And there's a mosquito in this room. Bye for now.